What is going on, guys? This is Skyhound, also known as Xavier Pierce, Geek Archivist. Well, it's 2025, and obviously, we are only a few days into the 25th anniversary of Lightspeed Rescue. So I felt like coming up with a top 10 episode pick on my end in terms of which ones I enjoyed. Do keep in mind, this is just my personal opinion and preference in terms of which ones I enjoyed the most. Some of you guys might likely have different episodes in terms of picks, but what I do know is this: that Lightspeed Rescue has hit the 25th milestone in terms of the anniversary. Recently, SPD hit the 20th anniversary, which of course I did a video on that. I will put a link in the description down below. But before I actually do get started on this, I do want to share a quick little story with regards to conventions before I get into my top 10. Let me go get that real fast. Okay, guys, so before I actually get started on doing the rest of the top 10 video, I want to share a quick convention story that I had. This was back in 2023, and I had attended a convention called Japan World Heroes. Now, while most of you guys likely know about Power Morphicon, which is strictly on Power Rangers, this is not the point of this. What is the point is that I was going to a convention which is strictly on Japanese tokusatsu. Now, for those of you guys who know the definition of the term, I don't have to explain it, but I will try and keep it short. Put simply, it is TV shows and movies that utilize visual effects. Can't make it any more simple than that. In addition, for Japan World Heroes, this mostly consists of kaijus like Gojira or Gamera. Then we also have Super Sentai, which is where Power Rangers comes into play. We also have Ultraman, that is part of this. And finally, we have Kamen Rider. Now, I would eventually try to go over that one at some point, but right now I'm going to be doing Lightspeed Rescue. So, to get to this point, one of the main objectives for me being there was to meet up with the vendor of Sentai Jackets. There's the picture of the guy. He said he goes by the name Rich. I don't think that's the real name, but one of the things that I went there for, besides picking up my online order, was to discuss a little bit about Power Rangers, and he went over with me the story about the jackets, the Lightspeed Rescue jackets, FYI. There's the picture. So the story goes that Mike Chat, Lightspeed Blue Ranger, he met with Rich, and likely he was wearing his jacket at the time of the meeting. At least that's how I think it went. They were discussing a bit about not just the franchise, but also a bit about, what Rich does. And then they were going into a bit about the jacket, the material. FYI, all six Ranger actors got to keep their jackets at the time of Lightspeed Rescue finishing. Now, there's the common complaints with regards to materials for, the actors and all that. In the case of jackets, the most obvious one is this: lack of more pockets. As stupid as that sounds, it's a common complaint. I kid you not. The second obvious complaint is the material. What was it made out of? How long did it take to make? Was it going to cause issues if it was reacting with water. Does it cause the material to shrink? You get the picture. But anyway, my best guess on the whole situation is this. They were discussing about, you know, what the guy does. He explains to them, he explains to Mike, how he was trying to do it. I don't know if he asked questions to Mike about the show or anything else. Might have to ask Rich again about this. But what he did, at least to my knowledge, is take the notes and information that he got, worked on the jackets, improved on it, which arguably explains why you see all of them wearing the improved jackets compared to the ones that they got from the show. There is obvious differences. Now, whether or not they are still there, with them, I'd likely have to ask. But I could arguably look at video from the episodes to do comparisons if I wanted to. The differences is obviously night and day. You can take a look yourself. Okay, guys, so before I get started on this one, I do want to make clear a few things. In terms of my list, I do mention a little bit about some differences between American versus Sentai. I also give a quick shout out to Catherine Sutherland and Nakia Baris. They have actually interviewed at least two of the Lightspeed Rescue Rangers, Green and Yellow in particular. I will put a link in the description down below, again, for those who are interested. But with that being said, I do cover as much as I can in terms of, what went on in each episode to the best of my ability, and then give my rating just, as it is. Okay, so regarding the differences between American and Sentai, let's get the basic stuff out of the way. The Sentai version, Go-Go 5, is the 23rd entry of the Super Sentai teams. Lightspeed Rescue is the 8th entry in the Rangerverse. FYI, no other YouTuber tried using that term, Rangerverse. I dare you to look up anybody who has. The theme is pretty much the same, but I will expand on that a little bit later. So, the main theme of this, everyday individuals who are professionals that are saving lives, like those in the medical field. You got paramedics, you also got those who work in the police force, and then you also have firefighters, as well as pilots. In The original show, the Sentai season, you have five siblings and the father, who is a scientist. The mother is not mentioned as often, more towards the end. Now, in terms of profession, before I expand a little further, I want to be clear. I did find through some digging, there is an article on Screen Rant that, from my observation, I would say it justifies the criticism regarding the dismal and sometimes confusing writing of Power Rangers. Why is that? Because you have teams that are sometimes professionals, but then you also have teams that are young, teenagers. This, in turn, arguably does bring up a particular conundrum. Having young people fight in battles that they are unprepared for, ill equipped, and have no context on what is going on and why they were chosen. This part is one of the main, one could argue, issues with Power Rangers as a concept. And that's justifiable. Are there channels that address this? Likely, but it depends on who you ask. Now, with that being said, I will put a link in the description down below for that article for those who are interested. So, let's get straight to the rest of this comparison here. The American version only had 40 episodes. The Sentai version had 50 episodes. So the difference there is 10. However, what is interesting about the American version is that one, it has an original Ranger that the Sentai season does not have. Number two, you also have stories that are different from the Sentai version, and it also gives tribute to ones who are no longer with us, because there is one particular episode that is actually a part of my list. Now, on top of that, there is actually some differences in terms of what does get covered for, like, story and all of that. But there is one particular, you could say, consistent part, and that has to do with the villains. Considering that they're demons, they are likely to sometimes turn on each other, which is kind of the case with both, takes, American as well as Sentai. Are there ones who actually go over it? Depends on who you ask. Now, before I go into my top 10 list, I should have mentioned this before I actually cut off the feed there, but I want to give a quick shout out to Catherine Sutherland and Nakia Baris, who have actually interviewed two of the Lightspeed Rescue Rangers, Kelsey as well as Joel. In case you're wondering, that's Keith Robinson, who plays Joel, as well as Sasha Williams Craig, who plays Kelsey, the green and yellow Lightspeed Rangers. For those who are interested, I will put a link in the description down below. I have actually participated in a few of those live streams in which, fans get to ask questions. Yes, they have members that are part of YouTube. Then you have ones that are also part of Patreon. I used to do a little bit of both. So, with regards to those two, the only one I asked questions about was from Keith Robinson when he was joining in. However, what I do recall very well is the fact, even though I asked two questions, Because of time constraints, only one of the two was asked. So that means I'm going to have to dig into the chat and the video and find my questions and then go from there. So if I ever do get a chance to meet with Mr. Robinson, that I might be able to try and ask the second question. What doesn't surprise me, however, is the fact that there are likely other fans who have asked similar questions. So, with that part being covered, let's get straight into my top 10 episodes, shall we? Okay, starting at my 10 pick, I'm gonna have to go with Wrath of the Queen. Now, this episode is episode 37. This aired on November 15 of 2000. So the quick summary of this is that four of the Rangers get trapped by Ben Shira, and Carter has a decisive showdown in the Skull Cavern with her. In addition, Queen Ben Shira does kill Vipera and Lokai in her quest for power. So what basically happens is that at the start of it, um, what was it? Oh yeah, of course, Jinxer comes across Queen Banshira's energy chamber, and then Viper gets summoned, and she's wondering like, why am I over here? To which, of course, Queen Banshira expresses her utter disappointment and anger at Vipera's constant failures. As punishment, she takes away her life force and also completes her bodily transformation. But that's not the only thing that she does. So she does manage to capture the Rangers, at least four of them. But the thing is that prior to doing that, Lokai um, requests from Queen Benshira to let him fight the Rangers. And she does grant his request, but she also gives Lokai the false impression of being, one of her favorites. And as a result, when he goes to, prior to going to fight the Rangers, Diabolico wishes Lokai luck against fighting them as a token of goodwill and, their friendship. Although, let's be honest here, the writing is a bit odd in terms of doing that. Lokai gives Diabolico a spider pendant. And as a result, Jinxer does question Queen Banshira, why did she grant his request? She points out to Jinxer that she doesn't trust anybody. And it is here that after she gets her body back that we see, as the viewers, her mentality. She sees the entire demon crew who has constantly been trying to bring her back as expendable. Now this key point, this is only in the American version. Rarely do you ever see enemies turn on each other. Rarely. So, with that being said, this episode is actually a key point to an extent of what happens towards the end of Lightspeed Rescue. So, one of the key things that happens is that when Kelsey, Chad, Joel, and Dana do fight against Lokai, they are sent to investigate an energy flux over at the stadium. But Diabolico eventually joins in, and this is where we see the Queen really getting, ahead of herself. So Diabolico does try to join the fray and help Lokai. So as Lokai is fighting against the Rangers and Diabolico tries to help out, Banshira then decides to, you know, I guess you could argue, um, reiterate what she told Jinxer, that she sees them as expendable. So as Diabolico is about to fire his attack, he's telling Lokai to get out of the way. But as a result, Lokai does get hit by Diabolico's attack. As a result, he gets killed. In addition, she also traps the Rangers and then tells Carter, if you want to get them back, try and find me. So Carter does eventually get to the stadium and leaps into the vortex to try and save them. But here's where things get a little interesting. Diabolico tells Carter about Queen Banshira's weak spot. And considering that Diabolico knows that he's just an expendable pawn, he's willing to divulge said information. So when Carter does face Queen Banshira and uses his battle booster, he finds it at the spot where Diabolico, told him to aim for. Eventually, they do manage to escape. And then as a result, the Rangers do briefly fight against the Queen, but she eventually retreats. And then the fact that, Diabolico now no longer has his best friend with him, he vows revenge against the Queen. That is roughly the summary of this episode. Now, I will say that in terms of writing, this one was a bit weak to an extent. It does show that, the Queen doesn't care about anybody, just herself. Objectively, that part is okay, but when you add in character development and then the fact that it's not just Diabolico that gets betrayed, but also the rest of the other demons. I mean, if you look back on one episode where Olympius said that they need to join forces, obviously he's lying to Lokai and Viper's faces, and he tries to get them buried alive. But obviously they escape and then eventually bring back Diabolico, and they explain the situation that Olympius tried to get them killed, and Diabolico tries to exact his revenge, but that does not go well. But overall, I will say, if I had to give this score objectively, I'd give this one at best 6 out of 10. Subjectively, as a Ranger fan, I'd give this at least a 7 out of 10. That's just my general thoughts on the episode Wrath of the Queen. But yeah, that's all I can think of in terms of, giving the rough summary and a general analysis of, what I recall on the episode. Coming in at number 9 is the episode that comes after the Titanium arc. That is Olympius Ascends. This episode aired on August 19 of 2000. Now, for those who are wondering, that is episode number 17, in which the episode before that is the end of the Titanium arc, which is the Cobra Strikes. That episode is episode 16, and to give a little bit of context, they do a little bit of a recap of roughly what happened. Is the fact that since Impus now has the star power that was from originally Diabolico, after Diabolico was defeated by the Rangers, Carter, then the other Rangers hear from Queen Banshira, Diabolico may have failed, but my son will not. And Carter asks Ryan, her son, to which Ryan replies, Impus, he's worse than 10 Diabolicos. And what he is pointing out in terms of the writing of the story is that Impus is definitely worse considering he is the son of Queen Banshira. Now, since Impus becomes Olympius through the power of the star power that Diabolico has, obviously he is still a new demon and he doesn't have as much experience in terms of using his powers like Diabolico has, or even Jinxer or Vipra or Loki. I will say that on an objective standpoint, that's where the writing obviously feels a little weak. However, he does manage to catch 4 of the 5 Rangers. As a result, he does manage to do a little bit of shape shifting as a result, since he did, obviously beat the Rangers one-on-one. Now, Carter doesn't realize that he's being fooled, and neither does Captain Mitchell. But eventually, he does realize that something is amiss. In addition, Jinxer, Loki, and Vipra do send up a monster to try and, help lead the attack on the Aqua base. The difference being is that Olympius, disguised as the Rangers, he does tell, Vipra and Loki that he manages to get inside the Aqua base. And so they think that they'll be able to actually destroy the place. Hence the reason why they have a monster made up. The problem is that over time, Carter finds out that Olympius manages to get inside once he learns that he is the reason that he got inside the Aqua base to begin with. But Carter finds out that as he tackles Olympius into the water, that that demons are weak against water. As a result, the powers from the star power does get weak, and he gets his friends back. In addition, they do fight against the monster that was sent out to join them, and using the Max Solar Zord, the Rangers do defeat the monster that was sent out. As a result, Carter's friends do play a bit of a prank on him, since he did let out an enemy inside the Aqua base. But that's just the rough summary of that particular episode. Now, if I had to give my objective opinion on this, some of the writing was okay and other parts were not, particularly in the fact that they don't quite actually give a clear indication in terms of, the extent of the powers of the demons per se. That's where it felt a little weak. Subjectively, if I had to give this a rating, I'd give this one probably between a 7 and an 8. Objectively, I'd give this one a 7 out of 10. That's just roughly my general thoughts, as well as the rough summary of the episode Olympius Ascends. All right, coming in at number 8, the episode I chose for this list is episode 20, which is The Omega Project. That episode aired on September 9, 2000. I do recall watching this episode when it did air, and this also shows the debut of the Omega Megazord. So, the quick summary of this is that Joel has a younger cousin by the name of Simon, and they learn. The Rangers, as well as Simon and Miss Fairweather, learn about the asteroid that's coming up. But Olympius tells his mother, Queen Banshira, that he has a plan to try and destroy Mariner Bay in the form of an asteroid. And the thing is, when Simon finds out about this, and he eventually does tell Joel and the others, he does get brought over to the Aqua Base in order to tell Miss Fairweather. And the Rangers learn that there's a new project that Miss Fairweather was working on called the Omega Project. So when they learn about the asteroid coming in, they then try to use the Max Solar Zord to try and destroy it. However, Olympius foils the Rangers' plans by trying to destroy the asteroid. So, despite the first salvo by the Max Solar Zord, the second salvo gets stopped by Olympius using his powers from the Demon Star power that he got from Diabolico. It is at this point that the Omega Project is a go. Now, this is also the one episode, or at least a few episodes, where Ryan, the Titanium Ranger, while he is an original character, he is not in this episode because in one of the episodes, Ryan realizes that he knows there's some sort of a loophole that the demons can try to use to try and bring back the queen. So he leaves the team to try and figure that out. So anyway, as the Rangers board the new Omegazords in order to try and intercept the asteroid, despite their attempts at trying to put in the charges, which they do, and they're about to escape in order to try and escape the blast, somehow Queen Banshira learns about it and then tries to trap the Rangers. So when she causes the asteroid to become alive and ensnare the Rangers, Carter realizes that he has no choice but to initiate the Omega Megazord. Once we see it, they then have to use their weapon to detonate the charges manually. This, of course, causes those in the Aqua Base, as well as Joel's cousin, Simon, to be worried, thinking that they're destroyed. Moments later, though, they learn that they're actually all right. The asteroid is completely destroyed. Overall, if I had to give this my rating objectively, I would say this was definitely straightforward. And actually, since it is the debut of a new Megazord, we also get to see how it performs and all of that. So, from an objective standpoint, I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. Subjectively, I'd likely keep it the same, 9 out of 10. Now we're getting as we're slowly going through this list. I want to point out here that while there is 40 episodes, some episodes I am likely to go into some additional trivia just to let you guys know. Okay, guys, coming in at number 7 is the two-parter, which I'm going to put as one entire episode. That is the Lost Galaxy Lightspeed Rescue team up known as Trakeena's Revenge. Now, before I actually go into the actual details of what, giving a quick summary of this, I want to point out to you guys that when I was watching this for the first time, it was actually done on a VHS. Yeah, they put this on VHS back in the day. And on top of that, the funny thing is, when I was watching Lightspeed Rescue and then I saw this team up, I started reflecting back on the previous ones. And then it occurred to me, I'm going to go into a little bit of media history here. The very first team up, I want to be 120% clear here to you guys. In terms of media history for the Rangerverse, the very first, just to emphasize here, was Zeo and the Alien Rangers. However, like I'm doing with this, they put this as one entire episode. On top of that, the footage from that team up was from O Ranger versus Kaku Ranger. I'm referring to Sentai now. They took bits of that and used it for that one episode. That is in Zeo. For those of you guys who know, that purse monster, that was from that team up. Yeah, it was from there. If you go back and watch it, that is the very first that they ever did. I dare you to try to prove me wrong on that when I just presented the facts to you guys right there. Now, to get into some of the details. The team up for Lightspeed and Lost Galaxy, again, based off of the previous seasons. If GoGo 5 was 23rd, that would make Gingaman the 22nd entry. You see where I'm going with this? You guys do the math. On top of that, I had to do some digging around with regards to differences between Sentai and American. So before I actually show you guys those clips, or at least some of the clips, let's go over some of the differences, shall we? On the Sentai versus American. So on Sentai Vipra, that's the American one, the Sentai counterpart was Evil Spirit Princess Dennis. Diabolico, you flip that, you go to the Sentai side, you get Dark King Zilfiza. Sorry, I mispronounced that for a split second. Zilfiza. Olympius is the dragon Dark King Salamandus. Queen Banshira is Grandian. Lokai, not Loki. Lokai is Kobolda. Now, there are a few similarities here in terms of continuities. Remember how I said with Lightspeed, they kept red and pink in terms of the profession? Well, not just red and pink. Red, pink, and green. They kept those professions the same. In the case of, you could say, story continuity, sent the American version, Lost Galaxy, they kept a particular detail the same. Hyuga, I'm going by Sentai first. Hyuga, played by Teruaki Ogawa, is the brother of Ryoma. Ryoma is played by Maihara Kazuki-san. I apologize if I mess up a little bit on the Japanese. I'm still a beginner. The American side, you got Leo, who is the Red Ranger. Mike becomes Mike, who is the brother of Leo, becomes the Magna Defender. Sorry, I had a little bit of a brain fart there. But the point is, Mike is the brother of Leo. Leo was a stowaway to get into Terra Venture. You kind of get the idea here. However, there is some additional details here. So, the character known as Triskull in the American version, he is helping Trakeena, trying to gather human energy life force. I'm going a little bit into the lore here. I mean, not lore, the story here. The Sentai counterpart is known as Gil. What I think the Sentai version tried to do in terms of story, at least from my observation, sometimes they got certain bits right in terms of like how they're telling story and all that, compared to Americans. But to get to the point, in the team up, Gil, not Salamandis. Let me be clear. While Salamandis is actually, the offspring of Grandian, he was not the first. Gil was the first. The difference being, Gil actually tried to overthrow his mother. So she banishes him. So, with that part being said, I'm going to be playing some bits of that film just to give you guys some context. Okay, so here's what I'm trying to point out here. This character, referred to as Triskull in the American version, it again known as Gil in the Sentai version. So they kept some parts from this team up for the American version. They just took out some other parts. So again, I already explained a few minutes ago that, one betrayed the other. So here is a little bit of context in terms of some background that was used from this film. Try and pay attention. Now, here's the second part that I want to point out. My best guess is that they tried to figure out how to incorporate this into making it its own story, while at the same time trying to maintain, you know, um, who these characters are and what they actually do. So you have some similarities and differences between Sentai and American. This part right here that I'm about to show you guys, they actually didn't show this in there. I don't know if they actually explain um, what reason they didn't have the actor who plays Mike join in. Maybe, he had his reasons, or, there wasn't enough time to actually fit him in there. That's just speculation at this point. I'm just saying. On top of that, when it comes to writing some of this, they have a certain budget. And then you also have scheduling issues, conflicts, what have you. So it's the matter of how are you going to work your way around this? That's the thing. So in terms of me trying to figure out like, who I can try to speak to about this, trying to get information, do they even use social media on top of that in order to get, this type of thing? I'm just saying that for some people, like besides myself, who have tried interviewing some of these people, I'm gonna say it right now. While it is good that you sometimes ask the actors about this, there are certain departments that do this stuff, which is why on one or two of my videos I mentioned about the different departments. Let me be clear. Some of you guys are approaching this incorrectly. That's the reason why I'm pointing this out. Now, with this little tidbit right here that I'm about to show you guys, this is the part that was not shown in the American version. Okay, now that you guys know the differences between those two, let's I'm going to try to summarize this to the best of my ability. What's pretty clear is that somehow Trakeena manages to come back, and despite the point blank blast from Leo's battleizer in the final episode of Lost Galaxy, she actually has lost the ability to mutate as a result from the attack. So, what she tries to do is steal human life force in order to be able to do it again. Now, Queen Banshira learns about this after, there's a spy bat within the lab, and she also has the help of Triskull in order to get the life force. One of the victims actually happens to be the mother of a little girl, who of course notifies the Rangers about, what's going on. But unfortunately, she, gets caught in an attack by the enemy, of course. That's, of course, where the Lost Galaxy Rangers slowly come into play. Now, on top of that, Banshira somehow, despite being a demon, knows Trakeena and her abilities, which arguably, you can make the argument that she knows Trakeena's father, which I wouldn't put out of the realm of possibility here. However, I will say that sometimes, in terms of writing for the Power Ranger seasons, depending on which ones we're going over, some episodes they're written well, others are not. If you look at it from a writing standpoint. But anyway, Benshir is pointing out to her son, Olympius, if she does mutate or turn green, she will have more than enough power to even defeat you. So, despite him having the star power, and yes, he is still a novice, there is also, I want to point out here, some really obvious plot holes. So, before this episode even started, they do the previously on. Then they point out the betrayal that Olympius did to Lokai and Vipra. So there's some parts in terms of writing that does not actually fit as they're going into this. But anyway, Olympius tells his mother, "Fear not, I got my own plan." And he has a poison dagger to use against her. So when the Rangers do team up with each other, and Olympius does kind of like confront them, he's like, you know, how lucky could a demon be that he gets to go against both teams, try to take out both teams at once? But that's where the writing sort of kind of like, you know, deviates a bit. So when this young girl who actually helps the Rangers try to evacuate the building, helps them out, the Lost Galaxy Rangers team up with Lightspeed and wear firefighter get up in order to have them get out. So that part I showed you guys earlier with the Sentai footage, I don't know exactly the explanation behind them not, putting him in there. I don't know if we ever will, but if I ever do get the chance, I'll inquire about it. Unless I poke around online and somebody already beat me to the punch, in which case I will give credit where credit is due. But anyway, when when the Rangers do team up and then they fight Trakeena in that monster form as a result of that dagger, it's clear that they also have the Max Solar Zord, but even though that one's around and Ryan is not, pretty much the Lightspeed Rangers do realize they need some help. That's where the Lost Galaxy Rangers come in. Now, the Sentai version of the Lights of Orion, I forgot the name of it because I was looking it up once. But anyway, that power up does help the Lightspeed Rangers a bit, and then they defeat, Trakeena's actual form. The young girl that they encounter in the first half of this two-parter, Carter gives the girl a bit of a badge of, helping them out, being a junior ranger of sorts. Now, if I really had to give my rating of this from an objective standpoint, I wouldn't say that this was actually the weakest in terms of writing. There are other episodes that likely fit that bill. But objectively, I'm going to give this one, at best, between a 6 and a 7. That's me being generous of it. Subjectively, as a Ranger fan, I'm bumping it up. At best, it'd be somewhere between an 8 to a 9 out of 10. That's roughly just my general summary of this two-parter, which I'm just putting as one entire episode with regards to Trakeena's Revenge. Okay, so why am I using a few clips from not just Power Rangers in Space, but as you can see, I also have a bit of Power Rangers Turbo in here. The reason being is that when you think of Zordon, unfortunately, there are some who only know of David Fielding, who did provide the head. I did meet the guy, by the way, for those who are wondering. However, this might be true, but even though sometimes fan wikis do get certain information, not sure how it was done, but reportedly, Robert Manahan, aka Bob Manahan, as was shown in that small little bit that I got from the episode The Fifth Crystal, which is what I'm going to be going over in a bit. That is roughly how he was likely known. I don't know if he was on set, but maybe. So, what am I getting at here? He is the second voice actor. Here is the proof. Listen carefully. And I mean really carefully. That's one part. Now, let's get straight over to the turbo bit. This definitely sounded familiar until I started playing a little bit where the turbo Zords are actually introduced. Even though they don't show it, I am really certain we're talking about the exact same guy that is no longer with us. So now there's this part right here. Give me 1 second. Around here. Coincidence? I do not think so, but I am really certain we are talking about the exact same guy who is no longer with us. Rip Robert Bob Manahan. Now that we're at the halfway point, I'm going to be doing this more in terms of writing just as much, especially in terms of why these episodes are actually ones I enjoyed the most in terms of not just writing, but also character development. With that being said, the one that I have for my number 5 pick is actually the episode Trial by Fire. This is actually one of the earlier episodes of Lightspeed Rescue. And to make this point across, I'm going to have to take the line from Captain Mitchell here. Sometimes the obvious choice is the wrong choice. The Rangers are actually going through some, training through some sort of an exercise. 4 of the 5 do well, but when Carter is using the blaster and then he finishes, Captain Mitchell and the others observe the aftermath of his performance. And he berates Carter through some constructive criticism. And he points out, you may have gotten the fastest time, but you got the lowest score. And Carter doesn't quite understand. And the captain points out to him, you didn't take time to use this before you ever use a blaster. So when Vipra is going to use quake spikes to cause an earthquake to try and destroy Mariner Bay, Carter comes across a young boy who is trapped by flames, and then he comes across another set of victims where the ceiling of a parking lot is about to fall and possibly crush him. So when Carter is faced with the decision of, doing one over the other, the captain disagrees with Carter's decision and he says, put out the fire first. So Carter reluctantly does so, but he assumes that, the boy actually got hurt. But even though the boy is put in the hospital and Carter does confront the captain, after he goes back to the Aqua base, the captain points out that he did make the right decision, Carter, of putting out the fire first. So when he actually goes through the training camp, he then realizes that one of his hits was at a tank of gasoline. Eventually, he puts it together and goes back to the scene where he was told to put out the fire. Then Carter realizes that the captain's lesson was correct the whole time. Here we see again Captain Mitchell repeating the exact same line at the start of the episode. Sometimes the obvious choice is the wrong choice. And Carter then realizes, the weight of being a leader and all of that. And he, you know, kind of self doubts himself and he says, I'm not sure if I'm cut out to be a ranger. To which Captain Mitchell reassures him and says, I am. And so Carter eventually does, regain a bit of confidence. And the captain orders him to go help the others in stopping Vipra. So when Carter does actually visit the boy, he does give him a bit of a gift. He doesn't realize, though, that Captain Mitchell was also there as well, observing. And he leaves, with a smile on his face, realizing that, he made the right choice in making Carter a ranger. But that's roughly the summary just based on my memory regarding the episode Trial by Fire. Objectively, I'd give this one, I'd say an 8 or 9 out of 10. Subjectively, I'd roughly keep it the same rating. Okay, coming in at number 5, I'm going to have to go with the third episode, which is the earlier part of the show called Trial by Fire. That episode aired on the 26th of February of 2000. So as the Rangers are actually going through training, 4 of the 5 do well because Captain Mitchell points out to Carter that despite him having the fastest time, he has the lowest score because he didn't observe the situation before using a blaster. So, to get the point across, Captain Mitchell says to him that sometimes the easiest choice, let me start again. Sometimes the obvious choice is the wrong choice. And in addition to that, the Rangers are having to fight Vipra and one of the monsters because she's trying to cause an earthquake to try and destroy Mariner Bay. On top of that, as a result of the earthquake, there's a little boy that gets trapped near a wall of fire. And then there's another situation where there's some victims that's about to be crushed by the concrete roof of the parking structure when they go to try to help. And Captain Mitchell orders Carter to put out the fire first. And the two have a bit of an argument, but Carter eventually cooperates and puts out the fire. As a result, the boy gets injured and Carter blames himself. So by the time he gets back to the Aqua base, he's really annoyed and he tells the captain that he was wrong in making that call, but the captain is pointing out a particular lesson that Carter failed to understand from the start of the episode. And he says it again later on. So when Carter goes back to the training area and then he looks at the situation from a different lens, he realizes that the captain was right the whole time. Because when Carter was firing that makeshift blaster, one of his shots was at a tank of gasoline. And then he goes back to the scene and then he realizes Had he not put out the fire, the situation would have been worse. The canister would have exploded, just killing everybody there and also destroying himself. To which, at this point, Carter realizes his mistake and he hears the captain right behind him saying, again, sometimes the obvious choice is the wrong choice. So Carter is thinking to himself, I'm not sure I'm cut out to be a ranger. To which Captain Mitchell disagrees and says, I am. Because he realizes that as a leader, it is sometimes having to think before you act and then having to live with said choices. That is what the captain is trying to teach Carter in this episode before sending him off to help the others in fighting against Quakemon, the monster that was unleashed to try and destroy Mariner Bay. But that's just the rough summary of the episode Trial by Fire. I will say that when this show started, it definitely had some strong episodes in terms of writing, this being one of them. So if I had to rate this one, I'd give this one a 9, an 8 or 9 out of 10. Subjectively, I'd roughly keep it the same. Now, if I wanted to do one in terms of like where the episodes were weak, well, I'd have to choose some other episodes. But yeah, that's just my general summary of episode 3, Trial by Fire, which aired on February 26th. Okay, knowing YouTube, they're probably going to try and do the usual, but I will provide context if I must, because knowing them, they always abuse the copyright. I'm just using these clips to provide context for the episode that I'm trying to summarize for these top episodes that I'm putting for my list. Anyway, quick shout out also to Yandel Rosario for this one. I'm just borrowing it though, just to provide context for the episode that I'm going over, the Mighty Mega Battle. Okay, so in case you're wondering why I was venting my frustration at YouTube and the abuse of copyright, I'm not the only person that this has happened to. As a matter of fact, let me go even further before I finish up the little summary of this episode. On occasion, when I was doing some of these videos, I had to actually point out that I was using some of these clips without the audio, mind you, without audio, to explain because YouTube keeps saying that Toei is the one who's doing this, which I'd argue is a bunch of nonsense because sometimes I'm referring to people that I've met over at conventions and then explaining the story. Or I'm going by what someone else said, using the clip and then providing the information for informational purposes only. As you can tell from my tone of voice, YouTube tends to piss a lot of people off, myself included. Thank heavens, I actually debated them on that literally by telling them I am providing context from my own experience. There is nothing wrong with that. And thankfully, I won some of those because I had to do it when I was doing my tribute videos for the late Jason David Frank. So sometimes I had to post it, I had to make a post on social media pointing out the stupidity of YouTube because this has also happened to some YouTubers who I do happen to follow. It is so frustrating when people like myself have to point out that these companies abuse the living hell out of something because their damn feelings get hurt. Anyway, rant aside, Joel and Chad do manage to use that code to get the mega battles up and running. They do defeat Infinitor. Of course, Jinxer does manage to revive it, but despite that, the Rangers do manage to take it down. Towards the end, I will say that the ending part of this episode did kind of give me a bit of a chuckle because Joel obviously has the wrong type of thinking, to which, of course, Miss Fairweather is a bit annoyed and disgusted. Even his friends are also disgusted by the conclusion. And, of course, they get a bit of a laugh, realizing that Joel was being jealous over nothing. But anyway, objectively, if I had to give this a rating, I'd give this at best maybe a 7. Subjectively, however, as a Ranger fan, I'm bumping it up a point. An 8 out of 10. With that part being said, I apologize a bit for the little mini rant on this, but you can see that sometimes YouTube has a ego problem and the dislike against content creators.
Somewhere inside you, there's an ocean of goodness. The day that you realize that you are truly good, I want you to open this.
Okay, now since we're in my top 3, if the pictures and the audio wasn't clear, at number 3, I'm going with episode 13, Ryan's Destiny, which is actually a part of the 5-part episode arc for the Titanium Ranger. Before I go really quick into the summary of this episode, this is one of the times where you could say the equivalent is that of the Green Ranger from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Now, the Curse of the Cobra, that's the episode after this, is the equivalent in terms of the Green Candle arc. Now, how that is, I will explain towards the end of this summary of the episode. Anyway, Diabolico realizes that, he has to use his trump cards, which happens to be his strongest warriors. And Jinxer even pointed out that the ones in the box are his strongest ones: Demonite, Thunderon, and Falcar. Now, what those 3 are planning on using to try and destroy Mariner Bay happens to be feathers. The interesting thing here is that when Ryan goes inside the Aquabase, he does tell his father that, he's come to say goodbye and he needs to find himself, so to speak. Captain Mitchell replies, of course, with giving him a box, and he's telling him that inside of you is an ocean of goodness. The day you realize that you are truly good, I want you to open this. And he gives him that box. Prior to that, of course, or at least after that, the Rangers find out that Diabolical has unleashed some monsters. So when asked, what's going on, Captain Mitchell replies, trouble times 3. So when the Rangers do fight Diabolical's monsters, they get their butts handed to them. In addition, they learn about the feathers. And Captain Mitchell also hears on the monitor that those feathers, while they are harmless during the day, basically they find out that Demonite explains to them that when darkness strikes, the feathers explode. So Ryan, as he's about to leave, comes across a young boy with his sister playing over at a park. The two have a bit of a chat, and Ryan comes across one of those explosive feathers, although he doesn't realize it yet. But as the boy and him are chatting, he also having a younger sister as well, is trying to tell him to try to be nice towards her. And she's the only family that he has, which is a good point. So he gives him the feather as a means of trying, to try and reconcile with his sister. Now, when Ryan does approach the ticket booth and he's about to leave Mariner Bay, he can't quite decide. And he has a little bit of a talk with an old lady as he takes a seat on the bench. So the old lady is asking him, where are you heading? Ryan replies, I'm not sure. To which, of course, the old lady tells him, follow your heart. You'll find you're where you are supposed to be. So when Captain Mitchell does give the statewide alert about the feathers, Ryan also overhears it and thinks back to when he met that young boy at the park. He does manage to reach the mother and the kids in time, tosses out the feather, to which of course it explodes. And the boy thanks him and calls him his hero. This of course causes Ryan to think back to what his father told him. He opens the box, finds the titanium morpher inside, and goes to help Carter and the others to fight against Demonite, Thunderon, and Falcar. Ryan of course does fight them back, and the Rangers do celebrate for a bit. However, when Ryan is sleeping, Diabolico does penalize him for turning his back on him, despite raising him for a time. To which, of course, he gets a tattoo on his back, and Diabolico points out that it's no ordinary tattoo. That every time he morphs, it will creep up on his back until it reaches his neck and destroys him. But when Ryan wakes up, he thinks it's a dream. But there is a bit of a visual cue here. Right before he sleeps, as he's tossing and turning, you see his jacket fall. So when Ryan wakes up and pulls, back the bottom of his dress shirt, you see the tattoo is real, indicating this was no dream, and Diabolico did indeed punish him. Objectively, I'd give this a 10 out of 10 in terms of writing. I actually enjoyed this one a lot. Subjectively, I'd roughly give it the same rating. But that's just the summary as well as my general thoughts and a little bit of media history regarding episode 13, which aired on May 6th of 2000. Coming in at number 2 is the previous episode that I roughly went over as I was going through episode number 13, at least I think, is Truth Discovered. This episode aired on the 29th of April So what happens here is that um, Captain Mitchell explains to the Rangers about the incident, and Dana thinks that Ryan died in the car crash. But as Captain Mitchell is recounting the entire event, he points out that Ryan was actually saved by Diabolico. And eventually, the thing is that when Diabolico has explained to Ryan the exact same event, by the time Ryan does actually, get to the scene of the accident, the captain and him sort of have an exchange of words, and Carter's, pointing out that, they won't try and fight him. And the thing is that when the captain is trying to have Ryan remember what happened, we see the exact same scene play out again. The only difference is that it's now Ryan holding onto the branch and Captain Mitchell holding on to his feet. And so Captain Mitchell was literally trying to have Ryan come back to his senses by letting go. And then at this point, Ryan does eventually transform into the Titanium Ranger and then take the brunt of the fall. And despite, the other Rangers trying to convince him to come back, Ryan still has his doubts about, who he is. But I will say that despite the wiki stating that he does give up his morpher, there is some continuity errors. Specifically, right when Ryan returns to the lair, and he's telling Diabolico, "I'm done following you." And Diabolico is saying, "Don't you turn your back on me." And Ryan takes a look at Diabolico one last time and he just shakes his head. And Diabolico, furious, is telling him, "You will regret crossing me." I'm just paraphrasing here, but Diabolico is really angry at this point. And as Ryan's leaving, this is a continuity error, by the way, you see him with the morpher on his wrist. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, definitely writing issues there. But that's roughly the summary of episode 12. Overall, in terms of writing, however, I'd give this one objectively, at best, an 8 out of 10. Subjectively, I'm giving it at least a 9. Because this gives some context, not just with this episode about who Ryan was, what happened during that fateful night, but also with episode 11, because Captain Mitchell points out to the Rangers, "Hold your fire." And Carter is asking, "Why did you stop us, sir?" To which Captain Mitchell replies, "Because he's my son." In addition, I want to point out here, though, that I did some digging around. The young boy who played Ryan as he was a kid in that episode, I'm not sure how many know this, but that kid happens to be in the movie The Polar Express. I'm not joking. Look up the credits. You'll find it's the same kid. I'm just saying. But that's just not just my general thoughts on the episode, as well as the summary, but a little bit of media history there. Okay, so now we get to my number one pick. This happens to be a two-parter, which I'm going to be stating again. A lengthy one episode, the finale, The Fate of Lightspeed. Both of these episodes aired within a day of each other, which was on November. So the first one was on November 17, the second half was the day after. And it's basically when Queen Banshira is about to begin a ceremony to try to release the demons from the Shadow World to Earth. However, Ryan does try to warn the Rangers when he goes back to the place where the demons were once brought back. And despite finding out about it, Queen Banshira knows about Ryan's betrayal and, the fact that he's trying to warn the Rangers about the ceremony. Unfortunately, he does get caught by Queen Banshira. And he actually, he doesn't get caught, but she does take him out and takes the key. That opens the portal. However, in order for this to happen, for the demons to come back, there needs to be a set of rocks set in a certain formation as the planets are also aligning. Or in this case, not the planets, but the sun. There is an eclipse that will enable the access to the Shadow World. I'm kind of like paraphrasing here. Jinxer, of course, has a last-ditch effort that, despite the Rangers defeating the super demons, he has a card that is mostly batlings. So what the Rangers don't realize is that they're bringing in the batlings as they're coming back to the Aqua Base. This, of course, delights the Queen. But of course, if you were thinking back to an episode where I put the Wrath of the Queen at number 10, she only sees everybody as pawns. This, of course, does not go unnoticed by Diabolico. So they don't realize, as the Rangers realize that batlings entered the Aqua Base, they also take control of the Zords. This, unfortunately, causes the Rangers to become trapped within the Aqua Base, but they have to make their way to get to the submarine in order to get out. On top of that, not only do they lose the Aqua Base, but they also lose the Zords. Despite the rocks being put in their corresponding places, the Rangers do try to attempt to stop the ceremony. But when Carter manages to knock the Queen into the tomb, Queen Banshira tries to bring him down with him, and Carter is telling the other Rangers to close it. This is when Diabolico comes into play, and Queen Banshira thinks that he's actually there to help. Unfortunately, Diabolico points out, yes, I am here to help. Help the Rangers destroy you. So he cuts the tentacle that is holding Carter, and then the Rangers manage to pull him out, and they eventually close the lid, which of course not only stops the ceremony, but traps Queen Banshira in that portal forever. That is roughly the summary of this episode. In addition to that, the Rangers do manage to get back to their normal lives, and then Joel obviously does decide to go on that date with Miss Fairweather. However, right as the Rangers are giving back the Morphers, they see a fire truck going by, and then, there's an area within the city catching on fire. So, of course, they go back to their usual duties, but they don't have their morphers. That is the rough summary of the finale of Lightspeed Rescue. Objectively, I'd give this one at best an 8 out of 10. Subjectively, I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. But that's just the rough summary as well as what I think of that episode in general. Hope you guys like this. Also, quick shout out to the cast and crew of Lightspeed Rescue. Happy 25th. This has been Skyhound, also known as Xavier Pierce, Geek Archivist. Stay safe, stay sane, and as a good friend always once said, stay humble. May the power protect you. Peace.